At 3:17 a.m., the fog on Hawthorne Road always thickened. Not the soft coastal mist Salem was used to, but a heavy, unmoving fog that swallowed streetlights whole. Locals learned to recognize it. When it came, people closed their curtains without being told. Dogs stopped barking. Even the old wooden houses, some standing since colonial times, seemed to creak less, as if listening. That night, every porch light along the road turned on at the exact same second. No power surge was reported, no storms passed through, and no one had touched a switch. A retired couple were the first to notice something wrong. Standing at their living room window, they saw a figure beneath the streetlight across the road. Tall, too tall, perfectly still. It didn't sway with the wind. It didn't breathe. It didn't cast a normal shadow. It was just there. In Salem, people grow up with stories. Witches, trials, spirits that linger too long. Most learn to laugh them off, but there are older habits no one jokes about. Never pointing at things in the dark, never calling out to shapes you don't recognize, and never acknowledging something that refuses to move. The couple didn't wave. They didn't open the door. They just turned off the lights and waited. Across the street, a college student recorded from her phone. The video later showed nothing unusual, just a streetlight, fog, and empty pavement. But she swore while filming she could see it clearly with her own eyes. A man-shaped shadow, facing the houses, watching. By 3:18 a.m., the fog lifted, the porch lights turned off, and the road looked normal again. But the next morning, neighbors found something that didn't belong. Footprints, not leading away from the road, but toward the houses. They stopped at doorsteps, at windows, at bedroom walls. That's when whispers started, at diners, at church parking lots, in low voices after sunset. People brought up an old name that hadn't been spoken openly in decades, a rumor passed down from families who never left Salem. They said when the still one appears, it doesn't chase, it doesn't knock, it doesn't speak, it waits. And if it stands in front of your home long enough, it means someone inside has already been chosen. If you're drawn to true feeling horror rooted in real places, local rumors, and the kind of fear that lingers long after the story ends, make sure to subscribe and stay with us, because what happened next on Hawthorne Road is something Salem still refuses to explain.
People who don't live in Salem think the town ends where the souvenir shops stop. That's not true. Salem really begins at its edges, where sidewalks crack, where streetlights grow farther apart, and where houses stop being museums and start being homes people actually sleep in. Hawthorne Road sat right there, caught between the memory of history and the quiet dread of modern life. Most homes on the road were old, but not abandoned. Colonial-style houses with wooden siding, front porches that creaked when stepped on, and windows that had watched centuries pass. The kind of neighborhood where people waved politely but never asked too many questions. Locals had habits that outsiders found strange. Porch lights stayed on all night even when no one was expected. Curtains were drawn before sunset, and nobody, absolutely nobody, walked Hawthorne Road alone after midnight. It wasn't written anywhere, no signs, no warnings, just something everyone learned without being told. During the day, the road felt harmless. Kids biked past mailboxes, elderly couples tended small gardens, delivery trucks came and went. But when evening settled in, the air changed. Fog from the nearby woods rolled low and thick, clinging to the ground as if it didn't want to leave. At night, the streetlights hummed softly, and the shadows beneath them looked deeper than they should have. Residents often joked about Salem's past, witch trials, executions, paranoia, but there was an unspoken agreement that some things weren't jokes, especially the rumors passed down from grandparents who spoke in lowered voices. They said Salem had a way of remembering, and sometimes it reminded people it was still watching. The first official report came from a middle-aged man who had lived on Hawthorne Road for over 20 years. He wasn't superstitious, worked a normal job, paid his taxes, trusted locks more than prayers. He told police he noticed someone standing under the streetlight across from his house just after 3 a.m. He assumed it was a neighbor at first, but the figure didn't move. Minutes passed. The man watched from behind his curtain, waiting for a phone glow, a cigarette ember, anything human. Nothing. The figure was tall, too tall to be familiar. Its outline was sharp, almost unnatural, like a cutout against the fog. No facial features, no visible clothing details, just a shape that felt deliberate. When the man finally looked away to grab his phone, the streetlight flickered, and when he looked back, the figure was gone. No footsteps, no sound, no explanation. By morning, he convinced himself it was stress. By nightfall, he wasn't so sure anymore, because at 3:17 a.m., his porch light turned on by itself.
In Salem, fear doesn't arrive loudly. It seeps in through routine. The morning after the porch light incident, Hawthorne Road looked exactly the same. Trash bins lined the curb, cars left for work, a school bus stopped at the corner like it always did. If something had happened during the night, the town wasn't showing it. But people felt it. Neighbors lingered longer at their mailboxes. Conversations stretched awkwardly, circling something no one wanted to name. Everyone had heard something by noon, an offhand comment, a rumor passed quietly, a question that ended without an answer. Did you see anything last night? By late afternoon, the second report came in. A woman walking her dog just before dawn stopped short when the animal froze, hackles raised. Across the road, beneath a streetlight that hadn't flickered in years, stood a figure. It was closer than expected. The woman said it wasn't doing anything, not threatening, not aggressive, just standing there, angled slightly toward the houses as if choosing. Her dog whimpered. She pulled out her phone to record, hands shaking, whispering to herself that it was probably a trick of the fog. But the moment her screen lit up, the figure blurred, not vanished, not moved, just softened, like it no longer wanted to be clearly seen. The video showed an empty street. The woman didn't sleep the next night. By the third day, the town started remembering things it hadn't talked about in years. An older man at a local cafe mentioned his grandmother used to warn him about watchers. Not ghosts, not spirits, something older, something that appeared before accidents, illnesses, or sudden disappearances. People laughed it off at first, but no one laughed when a security camera on Hawthorne Road captured a shadow where no person should have been standing. The footage showed a streetlight, a patch of fog, and beneath it, a darker shape that didn't align with the light source. It didn't move for over 10 minutes. Then, at exactly 3:17 a.m., the camera feed cut out. When it came back online, the shadow was gone. Police increased patrols, but officers reported feeling watched. One admitted he refused to sit in his cruiser for too long near the edge of the road. Another said the radio crackled with static whenever he passed the same streetlight. That night, more porch lights turned on by themselves. One house, then two, then nearly every home on the block. Residents stood behind curtains, hearts pounding, watching the road fill with soft yellow light. And in the middle of it all, the figure stood again, closer than before, still not moving, still watching. No one opened a door. No one spoke its presence aloud. Because in Salem, everyone knows one thing. The moment you acknowledge something like that, it knows you can see it. By the fourth night, Hawthorne Road was no longer pretending. People didn't say the word fear, but it showed in small ways.
Grocery trips were rushed. Evening walks stopped completely. Curtains stayed closed even during the day, and porch lights, once a habit, became a necessity no one dared forget. In Salem, when something old stirs, people don't panic. They remember. A list of rules began circulating quietly, passed in whispers and text messages between neighbors. No one claimed to know where they came from, but everyone recognized them the moment they heard them. Don't stare too long. Don't point. Don't speak about it outside after dark. And most importantly, never invite attention. It was the kind of knowledge that felt inherited, like muscle memory passed down through generations who learned survival the hard way. An elderly woman who had lived near Hawthorne Road since childhood told her neighbors she'd seen something similar once before, as a girl, decades earlier. She said it appeared shortly before a man vanished walking home from a tavern. No body, no answers, just absence. Back then, her mother had pulled her away from the window and whispered, "If it's standing still, it hasn't decided yet." That sentence spread faster than any rumor. Meanwhile, the figure continued its silent visits, always after 3 a.m., always beneath the same streetlight, always facing the houses. Neighbors began sleeping in shifts. Some sat in dark living rooms watching through narrow gaps in curtains. Others avoided windows entirely, choosing ignorance over certainty. One man tried to confront it. He was new to the area, had moved from out of state, didn't believe in Salem's traditions or its fears. He told people they were letting history rot their minds. At 3:16 a.m., he stepped onto his porch. Witnesses later said the street felt wrong the moment he spoke, too quiet, like the night itself was holding its breath. He shouted into the fog, demanding whoever was there to leave. The figure didn't move, but something changed. The shadow beneath it stretched, slowly, unnaturally, reaching across the pavement towards the porch. The streetlight flickered, not once, but repeatedly, as if struggling to stay on. The man stopped talking. He went back inside without another word. The next morning, neighbors noticed deep scratch marks on his front door. Not clawed, not random. 5 long lines, dragged downward, precise and deliberate. That night, his porch light stayed off, not because he forgot, because the bulb shattered on its own. By then, people stopped asking if the figure was real. The only question left was why it had chosen Hawthorne Road, and whether standing still meant it was waiting or counting.
By the 5th night, the distance changed. No one announced it, no sirens, no warnings, just a quiet realization shared by the people who had been watching too long, sleeping too little. The figure was no longer standing beneath the streetlight at the far end of Hawthorne Road. It was halfway down the block. The first person to notice was a nurse coming home from a late shift. She slowed her car instinctively, heart racing, as her headlights swept across the pavement. For a split second, she thought she saw someone standing too close to the road. Then, the headlights passed through it. Not around it, through it. The shape didn't cast a shadow from her car. It didn't reflect light. It remained exactly where it was, untouched by brightness or motion, like a stain on reality itself. She drove home without looking back. By morning, the street felt smaller. Houses that once seemed comfortably spaced now felt pressed together, as if the road itself was tightening. Neighbors compared notes in hushed voices and realized something that made their stomachs drop. The figure was moving one house closer each night, always after 3 a.m., always without being seen in motion. Security cameras continued to fail, motion sensors never triggered, but porch lights flicked on in sequence now, like a countdown. People started sleeping upstairs. Others refused to sleep at all.
One family taped old iron horseshoes above their doors, following a superstition passed down through Salem generations. Another burned sage, even though they didn't believe in it. Belief no longer mattered, only habit did. A teenage girl claimed she saw the figure tilt its head, just slightly. Not enough for certainty, enough for terror. She said it felt like it was learning. That night, the fog rolled in earlier than usual, swallowing the road before midnight. When the figure appeared, it stood directly across from a house with its lights still on. Inside, a man watched through the crack of his curtains, breath shallow. He told himself not to blink, not to acknowledge it. But then his phone vibrated. A notification from his door camera. Motion detected. He looked at the screen. The camera showed nothing unusual, just his front porch, empty, silent. Behind him, in the dark reflection of the screen, something tall stood perfectly still. He dropped the phone. The next morning, his front yard was covered in footprints. They didn't lead away from the road. They led to every window of his house and stopped. By then, people weren't asking when it would leave. They were asking whose house would be next.
Salem has a saying most outsiders never hear. If it sees you notice it, it will remember you. By the sixth night, Hawthorne Road understood what that meant. The figure no longer stayed across the street. It stood on sidewalks now, close enough for details, if it had any. Those who risked a glance described the same impossible absence. No face, no eyes, no mouth. Just a darker shape where a person should be, outlined as if the world itself refused to fill it in. People stopped standing near windows. That didn't stop the feeling of being watched. Inside the houses, small things began to happen. Not dramatic, not obvious. The kind of details that make you question your memory. Keys moved from tables to floors. Doors unlocked themselves. Clocks stopped at 3:17 a.m. and refused to restart. A woman woke to find fingerprints on the inside of her bedroom door. They were tall, too high to be hers, pressed into the wood as if someone had leaned in close to listen. That was when the rumors changed tone. It wasn't just observing anymore. It was learning the houses. An old man who lived alone claimed he heard footsteps pacing his hallway at night. Slow, careful steps, stopping whenever he held his breath. He began sleeping with the lights on, whispering prayers he hadn't spoken since childhood. He told his neighbor something chilling before leaving town the next day. It knows which rooms we use. The most disturbing incident happened just before dawn. A mother heard her son talking in his bedroom, softly, calmly, as if answering questions. When she opened the door, the boy was sitting upright in bed, eyes open, staring at the corner of the room. She asked who he was talking to. He replied, "The tall, quiet man. He said not to be scared. He said he's been here before." The boy couldn't explain what that meant. That night, the figure stood directly in front of their house. For the first time, it reacted. The porch light flicked on, and the figure tilted its head, slowly, deliberately, toward the front door. Not threatening, expectant. No one answered. By morning, neighbors noticed something carved into the wooden post near the porch. Not words, not symbols anyone recognized, just a series of deep vertical lines. 5 of them. People began leaving Hawthorne Road voluntarily, packing cars in silence, avoiding eye contact. No goodbyes. Those who stayed told themselves the same thing. As long as it hasn't touched you, as long as it hasn't come inside,
"You still have time." But the figure had stopped standing in the street. It now waited at doorways, and Salem knew the rules were changing.
There was one rule everyone understood, even if they pretended not to. You never let it inside. Salem homes were built with this fear in mind. Thick doors, heavy locks, doorways meant to keep things out as much as keep people safe. For generations, families had believed that as long as the threshold was respected, whatever watched from outside would remain there. That belief didn't survive the seventh night. The house belonged to an older woman named Margaret Hale. She had lived on Hawthorne Road longer than anyone else still remaining. She knew the stories. She followed the habits. Porch light on, curtains closed, door locked before sunset. But grief makes people careless. Margaret had recently lost her husband. Neighbors said she'd been sleeping poorly, sitting alone in the dark, talking to herself. Some claimed they heard her front door open late at night, though no one ever saw her outside. At 3:16 a.m., her porch light turned on. The figure appeared directly in front of her door. Witnesses across the street watched through their windows, barely breathing. The fog was thin that night, enough to see clearly. The figure stood closer to the house than it ever had before, so close its shadow touched the doorframe. Then something happened that no one had seen before. Margaret's porch light flickered, and the figure raised its hand. Not quickly, not threateningly. It lifted its hand and placed it against the door. Inside the house, a neighbor later claimed to hear Margaret speaking. Her voice was calm, almost relieved. She opened the door. No one saw what happened next. They only heard the sound of the door opening, and then silence. The porch light went out. The figure was gone. Police arrived at sunrise. Margaret's front door was wide open. The house was empty. No signs of struggle, no broken furniture, no blood. But something was wrong. Every mirror in the house was turned to face the wall, and on the inside of the front door, carved deep into the wood, were the same 5 vertical lines seen before, only larger this time, deeper, as if pressed in with patience. Margaret was never found. After that night, Hawthorne Road stopped pretending this was something that could be waited out. People boarded windows, some slept in basements, others left town entirely. Those who stayed refused to open doors after dark, even for police, even for neighbors, because the figure didn't return to the street. It began appearing inside houses. Not fully, not clearly. Reflections that moved a second too late. Shadows in hallways with no source. Footsteps on stairs no one was climbing. Salem understood the truth then. The figure hadn't been choosing a house. It had been learning how to enter. And now that it knew, it wouldn't need permission again. Salem has survived worse than fear. That was what people told themselves. Witch trials, fires, plagues, centuries of guilt and rumor. The town had endured by standing together, by believing that shared belief itself had power. So after Margaret Hale disappeared, the town decided to act. Not officially, not publicly. Salem didn't need announcements for things like this. It started with small gatherings, neighbors meeting in living rooms with lights on and curtains drawn tight. Old books appeared, family journals, handwritten notes passed down through generations, pages that had never been meant for outsiders. They spoke of watchers. Not demons, not ghosts, something older, something bound to places where fear had been given form for too long. According to the writings, watchers did not hunt. They observed until the balance tipped, until someone broke a rule meant to hold them back. And once inside, they did not leave easily. The town tried protection first.
iron symbols nailed above doorways, salt lines across thresholds, candles placed in windows facing the road. Some families prayed, others didn't believe but still followed along. Belief wasn't required, participation was. That night, Hawthorne Road glowed with candlelight. At 3:17 a.m., every flame went out at once. The figure appeared in the middle of the road, not beneath a streetlight this time. Closer, larger. Witnesses said it felt different now, less distant, more aware, as if it had noticed the attention and decided to respond. A group of residents stood together at the end of the block, armed with flashlights and courage they didn't feel. One man shouted for it to leave Salem. The figure didn't move. Instead, the shadows behind the houses shifted. Streetlights flickered, radios crackled to life with static and fragments of voices that didn't belong to any station. Someone swore they heard their own name whispered from behind them. Then the figure took a step forward. It was the first time anyone had seen it move. The step was slow, heavy, final. People ran. The next morning, Hawthorne Road was changed. One house stood dark and silent. No lights, no movement. The family inside didn't answer calls. Police forced entry. The empty home was untouched, food still on the stove, beds slept in. But every doorway inside the house was scarred with deep vertical grooves carved at shoulder height, 5 lines in every room. That was when the town understood something terrifying. The watcher wasn't afraid of being confronted. It was offended. Salem had made itself visible to it, and now it was responding. From that night on, the figure didn't limit itself to Hawthorne Road. Reports came in from nearby streets, from the outskirts, from places where people had lived quietly, believing distance would protect them. The watcher was no longer tied to one road. It had learned the shape of the town, and Salem began to realize the truth buried in its oldest stories. You don't defeat a watcher, you survive it, and only if it allows you to.
By the 8th night, Salem felt like a town under siege. The figure was no longer just a shadow on Hawthorne Road. It had moved silently through the town's peripheries, appearing at doorways, in reflections, and in the corners of hallways. No one dared leave their home after sunset. Those who tried to move through the fog reported an overwhelming sense of being watched, even if the street seemed empty. The townspeople had begun keeping logs, notes about lights turning on by themselves, strange sounds, and, most importantly, the times the figure appeared. All reports converged on 3:17 a.m., but sometimes it came earlier, as if testing patience. It started choosing victims. First, it was a young couple who had just moved into a renovated colonial on the outskirts of town. Their dog barked incessantly at nothing. They dismissed it as nerves, but one night the couple awoke to footsteps pacing their living room. No sound from the stairs, no door opening, just deliberate steps on the hardwood. The next morning their home was empty, beds unmade, breakfast left on the table, no sign of struggle, but 5 deep vertical grooves were etched into the inside of the front door. Then the postman reported being followed. At first, he thought it was someone playing a prank. He felt eyes on him as he delivered letters. At exactly 3:17 a.m., he looked over his shoulder and froze. Across the road, the figure stood, watching, waiting. His heart hammered as he ran back to his truck. When he looked in the rearview mirror, the road was empty, but the tires of his vehicle left 5 indentations in the asphalt, identical to the marks on the doors of the abandoned homes. Salem began to notice a pattern. The figure did not attack violently. It did not knock on doors or demand entry. It watched, studied, and marked. But those who were chosen disappeared without a trace. Rumors spread. Some said the figure was a remnant of the witch trials, a spirit bound to Salem's fear.
Others whispered about older things, watchers older than the town itself, creatures that fed on attention, learning the shape of a house, the rhythm of a family, the habits of its residents. One mother swore she saw it standing outside her window. Her child had been asleep, she claimed, but it whispered her child's name. The girl woke hours later, pale, unable to speak of what she had seen. Only the marks remained on the windowsill. 5 grooves, as if someone or something had pressed its hands against the glass. By now, no one left notes outside their homes. No one opened doors. The town had collectively agreed on a strict curfew. Lights were left on, curtains drawn, cameras trained on every entry point. But the figure had already adapted. It did not need doors to enter. It could be anywhere, reflected in mirrors, glimpsed in photographs, or simply sensed in the corner of an eye. The townspeople began avoiding mirrors at night, covering reflective surfaces, and recording everything on cameras they knew could fail. Fear became a daily rhythm. Families whispered at dinner, fearful that even their words might carry weight. Children learned to sleep in pairs, in closets, under beds, wherever they could hide their presence. Pets refused to eat. Doors that were bolted from the inside sometimes unlocked themselves during the night. And all the while, the figure waited. Not in haste, not in anger, but with patience, watching, choosing, marking. By the end of the 8th night, Salem was no longer just a town. It had become a trap, a web of lights, locked doors, and whispered prayers, and the figure had begun selecting its next victims. No one dared ask who would disappear next. The question had become too dangerous to even consider aloud, because in Salem, one thing was now certain: acknowledgement was a choice, and choosing wrong could be fatal.
By the 9th night, Salem had transformed from a quiet town into a tense, sleepless community. Parents whispered in hushed tones, neighbors shared warnings, and children huddled in basements with blankets over their heads. Hawthorne Road, once a benign stretch at the edge of town, now felt like the center of a slow-burning nightmare. The figure was no longer predictable. It didn't simply appear under streetlights anymore. Some residents reported seeing it reflected in mirrors at odd angles, caught in photographs where no one had been. Others heard whispers repeating their own private thoughts, echoing them back from somewhere just beyond sight. It was aware, it was patient, and it had begun to escalate. A small group of residents decided to act. They met quietly in one of the few houses still occupied, aware that any misstep could draw attention. Their plan was simple, but dangerous. Create a barrier strong enough to hold the figure at bay, at least temporarily. They used iron rods, salt, and old protective charms from Salem's folklore. Candles lined the windowsills, mirrors were covered, and doors were reinforced with wood and locks. They called it the Watcher's Circle. At 3:17 a.m., the fog rolled in thicker than ever, smothering the street in white. All at once, porch lights blinked on and off, as if testing the perimeter. The figure appeared, not in one place, but everywhere at once, beneath the streetlights, reflected in mirrors, in shadows along the trees. Its presence pressed against the homes, heavy and deliberate, like a tide. The group held their breath. One resident shouted an incantation from an old family journal, words passed down for generations. Candles flared, salt lines shimmered, doors rattled, and then the figure paused. For a moment, it seemed uncertain, as if the protective measures were working. But then, it moved. Slowly, purposefully, across thresholds it should not have crossed. The salt lines crumbled under its touch. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, pressing into rooms where people huddled. Mirrors cracked one by one, spreading spiderweb lines that reflected the fog and nothing else. A young man screamed as he saw it in the reflection of a covered mirror, taller than before, stretching impossibly toward the ceiling. It raised its head, or what should have been a head. Its outline shimmered,
twisting in ways that violated geometry, yet somehow remained distinctly human in shape. One by one, the residents felt it inside their minds. Not physically, but mentally. They could hear whispers repeating their deepest fears. "You see me. You know me. You cannot hide." Panic spread. The group ran toward the reinforced doors, slamming them shut. But the figure didn't stop. It seemed to phase through walls, manifesting in corners, doorways, and hallways simultaneously. The neighbors outside, watching from windows and backyards, reported something horrifying. The figure had begun choosing individuals directly. Lights in certain houses blinked faster, porches flickered, and in a single home, an entire family vanished. No screams, no movement, only the deep vertical grooves etched into the front door, as though the watcher had pressed its hands into the wood once more. By dawn, the watcher's circle was shattered. Some residents fled Salem entirely, others barricaded themselves, unwilling to risk leaving. The town was no longer safe. Hawthorne Road had become a trap, a hunting ground for a presence that could learn, adapt, and invade without effort. Salem realized something chilling. No matter how carefully they tried to protect themselves, the figure was evolving. Awareness of it was not a shield. Resistance was not a defense. All they could do was survive and hope it would eventually move on. But deep down, everyone knew it had chosen, and soon there would be no safe houses left.
By the 10th night, Hawthorne Road was no longer recognizable. What had once been an ordinary street of colonial homes and quiet porches had transformed into a corridor of fear. Most residents had fled, leaving behind shuttered houses, abandoned cars, and echoes of a community that had once thrived on neighborly warmth. Those who remained moved like shadows themselves, speaking in whispers, avoiding windows and refusing to acknowledge the street outside. Children were rarely seen. Pets cowered under furniture, refusing food. Even the wind seemed different, thicker, heavier, like it carried a presence that could not be dispelled. The figure, now simply known as the Watcher, had stopped appearing consistently at 3:17 a.m. It no longer limited itself to Hawthorne Road. Sightings spread to nearby streets, sometimes glimpsed in fleeting reflections, sometimes seen standing silently on porches. Wherever it appeared, it left the same deep vertical grooves behind, 5 deliberate marks, etched into doors, walls, even furniture. Each mark was a signature, a warning, a record. Those who dared to stay began noticing patterns in its behavior. The Watcher did not kill, at least not in a conventional sense. It observed, it studied, it chose, and its selections were permanent. Those who disappeared were never found, leaving behind only the physical traces of its presence, as if reality itself had been hollowed out around them. Local authorities tried to investigate. Police entered abandoned houses, checked surveillance, and interviewed neighbors, but technology seemed powerless against it. Cameras froze, radios emitted static, and even modern locks failed when the Watcher was near. It was as if the laws of the physical world bent in its presence. Residents shared stories quietly, over coffee tables, and in whispered conversations at the few stores still open. One man spoke of seeing it reflected in his refrigerator door. Another described hearing a child's laughter echoing in an empty hallway, only to find no one there. Every account ended the same way. 5 vertical grooves, a memory of being watched, and a lingering sense that the figure knew far more than it should. By now, Hawthorne Road had become a test of survival. Families boarded windows, reinforced doors, and avoided mirrors. Yet the Watcher persisted. It didn't move quickly. It didn't make noise. Its method was patience itself. And the town understood something too late. Awareness itself was a trap. The few who had fled described the lingering fear that followed them. Dreams invaded by shadows, fleeting glimpses in mirrors, and footsteps echoing in empty hallways.
It was no longer a local phenomenon. It followed thought, memory, and fear. Those who left Salem carried it in their minds, like a mark invisible to the eye, but impossible to shake. Some elders spoke of it as a consequence of history, the town's collective guilt, the echoes of witch trials, and the generations of fear and secrecy. Others whispered that it had existed before Salem, waiting for towns to grow, watching humanity, learning patience, and choosing its moments. And yet, in the quietest hours, with curtains drawn tight and porch lights flickering, Hawthorne Road waits. The street is silent. The houses are dark. The air seems still. But the watcher is always there, watching, counting, and remembering. Salem's people learned a truth that cannot be ignored. Some things cannot be fought, bargained with, or understood. They can only be endured. And endurance has a cost. For those willing to stay, the final rule is simple. Do not acknowledge it, do not attract it, and do not forget that even your silence may be noticed. Because the watcher never forgets, and Hawthorne Road will always remember.
Salem is a town that wears its history like a shadow, and Hawthorne Road is the place where that shadow never lifts. By now, most residents have fled, leaving behind empty houses, boarded windows, and the faint smell of smoke from candles burned in fear. But the road is not empty. Somewhere in the fog, something remains, something patient, something that doesn't need to speak to make its presence known. The watcher is not a ghost. It is not a spirit. It is a pattern, a presence that adapts, observes, and chooses. It moves silently, entering homes without breaking locks, appearing in mirrors without reflection, and marking its territory with 5 deliberate grooves. Those who vanish are never seen again, leaving only these marks and the lingering fear in the minds of those left behind. Some people have tried to make sense of it. Scholars, historians, and even the police have investigated. They check cameras, patrol the streets, and examine reports. But nothing explains it. Technology fails, logic fails, and superstition is powerless. Those who understand the old rules, never acknowledge it, never speak of it, never invite it, know only that survival is temporary. Awareness itself is dangerous. For the few who remain in Salem, life has changed. Daily routines revolve around avoiding attention, staying indoors after dark, and covering reflective surfaces. Children sleep in basements. Families whisper at dinner. Even pets sense it, refusing to eat or leaving rooms entirely. The town has become a quiet fortress of fear, a place where silence is the strongest defense. And yet, the watcher waits. It does not rush, it does not panic. It studies, it adapts, it learns. Every movement, every sound, every shadow is observed, and someday those who remain may find that even their silence cannot save them. Hawthorne Road stands as a reminder that some fears cannot be named, some presences cannot be fought, and some shadows never leave. Salem itself remembers the watcher, passing the story in whispers, in warnings, in unspoken rituals that outsiders cannot understand. If you have stayed with this story, take heed. The next time you see a shadow that does not move with the wind, or a reflection that doesn't align with reality, or hear footsteps when no one is there, remember Hawthorne Road, and remember the rules. Do not stare, do not call, do not invite it, and above all, do not forget that even silence may be noticed. The watcher is patient, it is always watching, and never forgets. If you want more stories that send chills down your spine, tales of towns that hide secrets in fog and shadow, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned, because somewhere out there, another road is waiting, and a shadow may be standing at its end, watching quietly, patiently, endlessly.